Krishna
Hare Krishna Krishna
Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपीकांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदानेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरि प्रिये नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। बोलो श्री राधे गोलोकानंद भगवान की जय। बोलो श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय।
जय
जय
Hare Krishna everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
नारीना जी हरे कृष्णा तरुण
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna again. Hare Krishna सबको.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
राइट। सो रीना जी आ गए आप वापस चीनू को छोड़ के?
हाँ भैया, चीनू को छोड़ के आ गए, फिर चीनू आ भी गया। अभी कल चीनू सुबह सुबह निकल रहा है और फ्राइडे को हम लोग फिर से जा रहे हैं बाकी सामान पहुंचाने।
क्या बात है, कितनी ट्रिप कर रहे हो? एक ही बार में ट्रक लेके जाना था।
ट्रक लेके ही नहीं गए, बस वही लेके, लगता है कि वही लेके जाना चाहिए था।
But it's nice to go back and forth at least. क्योंकि फिर तो जाना ही है, जाते ही रहना है।
एग्जैक्टली।
तो अभी क्या प्रैक्टिस हो जाएगी।
यस, इट्स वेरी लॉन्ग ड्राइव, 7-10 आवर्स कुछ ज्यादा हो जाता है।
Right, you know, he's starting his medical
रेजिडेंसी।
क्या बोलेंगे, residency.
Yeah.
So he's going to be neurologist. So 7 continuous.
Wow, congratulations.
Pittsburgh is very good
7
medical
years का
school.
रहता है ना रेसिडेंसी?
Sorry?
Residency is pretty long, right? Neurology.
Yeah,
Years.
it's pretty long.
Yeah, and then another 3 years probably for his specialization.
Yeah, 7 years, probably 7+2 or yeah, something like that. 2 साल का fellowship उसके बाद.
Yeah.
So that's what he says. कि by the time he comes out, it will be time for his retirement. So
उसका
Yeah,
तो
it's
होगा कि नहीं पता नहीं, लेकिन आपके रिटायरमेंट का टाइम जाएगा तो उसकी
तो
तैयारी
रिटायरमेट की स्टेज में चले गए हैं भैया।
नहीं, but it's good, at least the road is clear and
Yeah, that's a good part.
on the right direction. ऐसे निशा जी की daughter भी also Nikita, she is going to be a cardiologist, right Nisha?
Yes.
Nice.
So she's already completed the residency, correct, in the process?
No, her 3rd year will begin soon.
So
That's
final.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's really great. चलो शुरू करते हैं। तो हम लोग yesterday we were reading about, again this chapter is about Bharat Maharaj, yeah, Bharat Maharaj, who was a king. He ruled the whole universe for thousands of years, yeah. Then he took sannyas, he went to Haridwar, and then he was highest in devotional service. In spite of all that, there was an incident which we read about a deer, and then he gets attached to the son of the deer, and then he doesn't find him at the end, and then so when he's giving up his body, he remembers the deer, and then what it shows is then he comes back as a deer in the next birth. But because he was such a highest devotee, he remembered his previous birth. So then he again comes back to the ashram in the form of a deer, and then when he gives up the body of a deer, then he takes birth in the Brahmin family, and in the Brahmin family he doesn't follow the rituals, but he is makes himself aloof to the world and totally devoted in the devotional service of Lord Sri Krishna. Yeah. And so after that, what happens is the King Rahūgaṇa of that area, when he is passing by, he asks other people along with Jaḍa Bharata. So his name is Jaḍa Bharata in this birth because he doesn't do anything, he just doesn't move, and he's so aloof from the world. He asks him to carry the cart, and then he cannot carry properly because he doesn't want to put any step on any of the animals or ants or anything, right? So then King Rahūgaṇa says him quite a lot of, negative things, but nothing happens to Bharat Maharaj. And then he is now explaining to King Rahūgaṇa about the transcendental message, how everyone, conditioned soul, is not really the body, right? Everyone is a soul. And that's the message he's giving to King Rahūgaṇa. Yeah. And after giving the message, Rahūgaṇa comes down, he goes down to Bharat Maharaj, and he's asking him, like, who is really Bharat Maharaj? Yeah. So Bharat Maharaj is replying, as we read in the yesterday's shlok, that my dear King Rahūgaṇa, you are also a victim of the external energy, being situated on the path of attraction to material pleasure. So that you may become an equal friend to all living entities, I now advise you to give up your kingly position and the road by which you punish criminals. Give up attraction to the sense objects and take up the sword of knowledge sharpened by devotional service. Then you will be able to cut the hard knot of illusory energy and cross to the other side of the ocean of nescience. Yeah. So that's the advice Bharat Maharaj is now giving to King Rahūgaṇa, that Jnana Simadai Tar Ati Param. Yeah. How can you go Ati Param? By doing Hari Sevya. So dedication to Lord Krishna. Yeah. So we'll start. Bharat Maharaj is continuously speaking to King Rahūgaṇa. We'll start with Shlok 21. Yeah. Anilji?
Rajo Vach Ho Nrajanma Khil Janma Shobhanam Kim Janma Visatta Parepya Mushmina Na Yad Dhashi Kesha Yashah Atmanam Mahatmanam Vaha Prachuraha Samagamaha. King Rahūgaṇa said, this birth as a human being is the best of all. Even birth among the demigods in the heavenly planets is not as glorious as birth as a human being on this earth. What is the use of the exalted position of a demigod in the heavenly planets due to profuse material comforts? There is no possibility of associating with devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. The birth as a human being is the best of all, is being told by Bharat Maharaj. Yeah, he says here, oh, Nirjanam. Yeah, Janm as a human being is Akhil Janma Shobhanam. Very difficult to get this human birth. Yeah, and in the human birth is where there is a possibility of associating with devotees and engage in devotional service, because even in Devata's law, in the heavenly planets, there is lot of material comforts, and so they don't really associate with the devotees and don't engage in the devotional service. So that is why it is mentioned that the birth as a human being is the best of all. So, and it's a temporary time period, so that we should not really waste this. Yeah, we should get engaged in the devotional service. And it says here, Satam Prasangam Mam Priya Samido Bhavanti Karna Rashyana Katha. Yeah. Only in the association of devotees can one relish the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just through a little association with a pure devotee, one can become successful in his journey back to Godhead. Yeah. So chanting, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, all that. Yeah. Tarun?
न हय अद्भुतं त्वच्चरणभज्य रेणुभिर् हतं हसो भक्तिर् अध्योक्षजे मला मोहोर्मधुरकद् यस्य समागमश्च मे दुष्टकर्का मूलो पहतो viveka. It is not at all wonderful that simply by being covered by the dust of your lotus feet, one immediately attains the platform of pure devotional service to Adhoksa Gaja, which is not available even to great demigods like Brahma. By associating with you just for a moment, I am now freed from all argument, false prestige, and lack of discrimination, which are the roots of entanglement in the material world. Now I am free from all these problems. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so this is being mentioned by King Rahūgaṇa, right? So King Rahūgaṇa is telling to Bharat Maharaj that simply by being covered by the dust of your lotus feet, yeah, one attains the pure devotional service to Adokshas. Yeah, one of the name of Supreme Personality of Godhead is Adokshas. Yeah, and so then he's saying that now he's free from all these problems. Yeah, says your association with pure devotees certainly frees one from the material clutches. This is certainly true of King Rahūgaṇa's association with Jaḍa Bharata. King Rahūgaṇa was immediately freed from the misgivings of material association. The arguments offered by pure devotees to their disciples are so convincing that even a dull-headed disciple is immediately enlightened with spiritual knowledge. Yeah. Anisha?
नमो महद्भ्यो अस्तु नमः शिशुभ्यो नमो युवभ्यो नम आवटुभ्यः ये ब्राह्मणा गाम वधूतलिंगा लिंगाक्षरन्ति तेभ्यः शिवमस्तु राज्ञाम्. I offer my respectful obeisances up to the great personalities, whether they walk on the earth's surface as children, young boys, avdutas, or great Brahmins. Even if they are hidden under different guises, I offer my respects to all of them. By their mercy, may there be good fortune in the royal dynasties that are always offending them. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So what King Rahūgaṇa is now saying is that Jaḍa Bharata Maharaj plus all the great personalities, yeah, who are on the earth's surface, who are saintly, who encourages devotional service, he offers his respectful obeisances. Yeah. And it even says that if one offends a great personality like great saints, the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not excuse one, although the great personalities themselves might not take offense. Maharaj Ambrish was offended by Durvasa Muni, who even approached Lord Vishnu for pardon. Lord Vishnu would not grant him pardon. Therefore, he had to fall down at the lotus feet of Maharaj Ambrish. Even though Maharaj Ambrish was a Kshatriya Grihastha, one should be very careful not to offend the lotus feet of Vaishnavas and Brahmins. Yeah? Rinaji?
श्रीशुकुवाच इत्यमेवमुत्तरा माता स वै ब्रह्मर्षि सुतः सिन्धुपतयः आत्मसतत्वं विगणयतः परानुभावः परमकारुणिकतयोपदिश्य रहुगणेन सकरुणमभिवन्दितः चरण आपूर्णार्णव इव निभृतकर्णोर्म्याशयो धरणिमिमां विचचार. Srila Sukdev Goswami continued, My dear king, O son of Mother Uttara, there were some waves of dissatisfaction in the mind of Jaḍa Bharata due to his being insulted by King Rahūgaṇa, who made him carry his palanquin. But Jaḍa Bharata neglected this, and his heart again became calm and quiet like an ocean. Although King Rahūgaṇa had insulted him, he was a great Paramhimsa. Paramhans. Being a Vaishnava, he was naturally very kind-hearted, and he therefore told the king about the constitutional position of the soul. He then forgot the insult because King Rahūgaṇa pitifully begged pardon at his lotus feet. After this, he began to wander all over the earth just as before. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So as we know, this Srimad Bhagavatam is being recited by Srila Sukdev Goswami ji. Yeah. And he's addressing to my dear king. Who is the king?
Parikshit.
Maharaj Parikshit.
Maharaj Parikshit, right? Because Sukdev Goswami ji is reciting this to Maharaj Parikshit, and Maharaj Parikshit is son of Mother Uttara. Yeah. And who is the father? Whose son is Maharaj Parikshit?
Abhimanyu.
Abhimanyu, right? So Abhimanyu and Uttara, if you remember the story, yeah, Abhimanyu, Ashwathama, he takes a vow that he will finish the Pandu Vansh, and then he throws the Brahmastra. Yeah, no one can stop the Brahmastra. And he throws the Brahmastra at Uttara's stomach, because that's where Parikshit Maharaj is, right? She was in the womb of Uttara, yeah, Mother Uttara, and Lord Krishna sails him inside the womb of Uttara from the Brahmastra of Ashwathama, right? So that's why Parikshit Maharaj is also called Vishnu Rath, like who is protected by Lord Vishnu himself. Yeah. So anyway, so this is how Srila Sukdev Goswami ji is telling that Vaishnavas are generally very kind-hearted. Therefore, if one immediately submits himself at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, one is immediately cleared of offensive reactions. If one does not do so, the reactions will remain and the results will not be very palatable. Yeah. Anilji?
So Veerpatirapi Sujan Samvagat Paramatma Satatva Atmanya Vidya Dhyaropitam Dehatma Matim Visarja Evam Hi Nrapa Bhagavadra Shrita Shritanubhavaha. After receiving lessons from the great devotee Jaḍa Bharata, King Rahūgaṇa of the state of Savavira became completely aware of the constitutional position of the soul. He thus gave up the bodily conception completely. My dear king, whoever takes shelter of the servant of the Lord is certainly glorified, because he can without difficulty give up bodily conception. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So as we can see, Jaḍa Bharata, yeah, gives the spiritual message of how body is different than the soul, and our real constitutional position, yeah, is in the soul, yeah, as a servant to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, right? And Jaḍa Bharata Maharaj gives this message, so King Rahūgaṇa gives up the bodily conception completely. Okay. And this completes the chapter 13. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. So we'll start the chapter 14, right, which again explained by Srila Sukdev Goswami ji to Parikshit Maharaj, and the again extraction from the message of Jaḍa Bharata Maharaj. And this adhyaya is about the material world as the great forest of enjoyment. Yeah, this explains how a human being, right, or any kind of conditioned soul wanders in this world, and engaged in so many different things and forgets the constitutional position. So we'll start the shlok 1, Nisha.
स एष देहात्ममानिनां सत्त्वदिगुणविशेषविकल्पित कुशलाकुशलसमव्यवहार विनिर्मित विविध देहावलिभिर्वियोग संयोगाध्यनादि संसारानुभवस्य द्वारभूतेन षडिन्द्रियवर्गेण तस्मिन् दुर्गावदसुगमे ध्वन्यापतित ईश्वरस्य भगवतो विष्णोर्वशवर्तिन्या मायया जीवलोकोऽयं यथा वणिक्स्थार्थोऽर्थपरः स्वदेहनिष्पादितकर्मानुभवः श्मशानवदशिवमायां संसाराटव्यां गतो नाद्यपि विफलभौ प्रतियोगे हस्ततापोपशमनि हरिगुरुचरणारविन्द मधुकरानुपदवीं वरुन्धे. When King Parikshit asked Sukadeva Goswami about the direct meaning of the material forest, Sukadeva Goswami replied as follows: My dear king, a man belonging to the mercantile community, Vanik, is always interested in earning money. Sometimes he enters the forest to acquire some cheap commodities like wood and earth and sell them in the city at good prices. Similarly, the conditioned soul, being greedy, enters this material world for some material profit. Gradually, he enters the deepest part of the forest, not really knowing how to get out. Having entered the material world, the pure soul becomes conditioned by the material atmosphere, which is created by the external energy under the control of Lord Vishnu. Thus, the living entity comes under the control of the external energy, Daivi Maya, living independently and bewildered in the forest. He does not attain the association of devotees who are always engaged in the service of the Lord. Once in the bodily conception, he gets different types of bodies, one after the other under the influence of material energy and impelled by the modes of material nature, Sattvagun, Rajogun and Tamogun. In this way, the conditioned soul goes sometimes to the heavenly planets, sometimes to the earthy planets, and sometimes to the lower planets and lower species. Thus, he suffers continuously due to the different types of bodies. These sufferings and pains are sometimes mixed. Sometimes they are very severe and sometimes they are not. These bodily conditions are acquired due to the conditioned soul mental speculations. He uses his mind and five senses to acquire knowledge, and this brings about the different bodies and different conditions. Using the sense under the control of the external energy, Maya, the living entity suffers the miserable conditions of material existence. He is actually searching for relief, but he is generally baffled, although sometimes he is relieved after great difficulty. Struggling for existence in this way, he cannot get the shelter of pure devotees who are like bumblebees engaged in loving service at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so Sukadeva Goswami ji is kind of answering Parikshit Maharaj's question. Yeah, he's asking what is the material forest? Yeah, and essentially what Sukadeva Goswami ji is saying here is material forest is like, each conditioned soul being greedy enters this material world for some material profit. Yeah, all of us, because we wanted to be in this world, wanted to be independent, whatever karmas we had, the reactions, yeah, being greedy for material world, for some material profit, yeah, all the conditioned souls come into the material world, is what is being mentioned. And once it's in the material atmosphere, what happens is we come under the control of Maya. Yeah, what is Maya? Maya is the external energy of the Lord Vishnu. Yeah, if you remember, there's an internal energy, yeah, Antaranga Shakti, Bahiranga Shakti. Yeah, So the internal energy is the spiritual energy. The external energy is the Maya. Yeah. And the living entities are under the control of Maya. And as we know in the material nature, yeah, we have read this again and again, that is a Satogun, Rajogun, and Tamogun. So the conditioned soul comes under those different gunas and accordingly does the karma and keeps getting the reactions of those karmas, good or bad. Yeah. And based on that, sometimes go to the heavenly planets, sometimes to the earthly planets, lower planets. How many planets are there in this universe? Remember? How many planets
14.
are 14, right?
Yes.
So Earth is 7. Earth is 7. We have 6 more planets above us. And we have 7 planets above us and 6 under us. Right? The bottommost planet is Patal. The topmost planet is Satyalok. Yeah? Satyalok, which is also called as Brahmalok because Lord Brahma resides there. Yeah? Lord Vishnu resides in the Vaikuntha Lok, which is in the spiritual world, which is beyond those 14 planets. Yeah. And then above us, we have the Devlok and all these different loks. Yeah. But the point is, so based on the karmas, the conditioned soul goes sometimes to earthly planets, sometimes to lower planets, and lower species, sometimes to the higher planets, due to different types of bodies, keep suffering, keep rotating around. Yeah. And doesn't take shelter of the pure devotees. Yeah. Doesn't get engaged in the devotional service of the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. And then, because of that, we never go back to Godhead, is what is being mentioned in this big paragraph right now. Yeah. Tarun?
Yasyam yuhava ite sad indriya namana karmana dasyavya iva te tad yatha purusasya dhanam yat kinche dharmanupayikam bahu krichadradhigatam satsat parama purusardhana rakshano yoso dharmas tam tu sam paraya uddaranti tad dharmanyam dhanam darshana sparsana swaravarsa Sana vasardhana grana sankalpa vyasaya graha gramaya pabhogena kunathasya jitatmano yatha sarthaya vilumpanti. Hare Krishna. In the forest of material existence, the uncontrolled senses are like plunderers. The conditioned soul may earn some money for the advancement of Krishna consciousness, but unfortunately, the uncontrolled senses plunder his money through sense gratification. The senses are plunderers because they make one spend his money unnecessarily for seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, desiring, and willing. In this way, the conditioned soul is obliged to gratify his senses, and thus all his money is spent. This money is actually acquired for the execution of religious principles, but is taken away by the plundering senses. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so Sukdev Goswami ji continues to describe what happens in the material existence, how a conditioned soul spends everything, whatever he earns, to the sense gratification. अथ च यत्र कौटुम्बिका दारापत्योदयो नाम्ना कर्मणा वृक्षिगाला एवानिच्छतोऽपि कदर्यस्य कुटुम्बिन् पुरुनकवत्सरं संक्षमानं मिस्तोऽपि हरन्ति. My dear king, family members in this material world go under the names of wife and children, but actually they behave like tigers and jackals. A herdsman tries to protect his sheep to the best of his ability, but the tigers and foxes take them away by force. Similarly, although a miserly man wants to guard his money very carefully, his family members take away all his assets forcibly, even though he is very vigilant. Right? Sukdev Goswami is describing what happens to the conditioned soul in this materialistic world. Yeah, Arinaji.
Yeah. Yatha Hyano Vatsaram Krishnayamanya Dagdhabijam Kshetram Punare Vapan Gulma Trinavirudbhir Gavharimiv Bhavatyeva Grihashramah Karmakshetram Yasminnahi Karmanya Sedante Yadayam Kamakaranda Esha Avasatha. Every year, the plowman plows over his grain field, completely uprooting all weeds. Nonetheless, the seeds lie there and, not being completely burned, again come up with the plants sown in the field. Even after being plowed under, the weeds come up densely. Similarly, the Grihasthashram, family life, is a field of fruitive activity. Unless the desire to enjoy family life is completely burned out, it grows up again and again. Even though camphor may be removed from a pot, the pot nonetheless retains the aroma of camphor. As long as the seeds of desire are not destroyed, fruitive activities are not destroyed. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so what Sukdev Goswami is saying to Parikshit Maharaj is that we get so much attached to the materialistic world and materialistic relationships, right, that we actually don't get too much involved into the devotional service. And what he's saying is, as long as the seeds of desire are there, whether good desires or bad desires, the results are always obtained and the activities are not destroyed. And that results in taking birth again and again. Yeah. Anilji?
तत्गतो दंशमशक समापसदैर्मनजैः शलभाशकुन्त कर मूषकादिभिरुपरुध्यमान बह्य प्राणः क्वचित् परिवर्तमानोऽस्मिन् ध्वन्य विद्या कामकर्म विरूपरक्त मनसानुपन्ना पपन्नार्थम नरलोकम गंधर्वनगरम पपन्नमिति मिथ्या दृष्टिर्नुपश्यति. Sometimes the conditioned soul in household life, being attached to material wealth and possession, is disturbed by gadflies and mosquitoes, and sometimes locusts, birds of prey, and rats give him trouble. Nonetheless, he still wanders down the path of material existence. Due to ignorance, he becomes lusty and engages in fruitive activity. Because his mind is absorbed in these activities, he sees the material world as permanent, although it is temporary, like a phantasmagoria, a house in the sky. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So we are talking about like all these flies and mosquitoes because Sukdev Goswami is describing how this material world is like a forest and what happens, right? One gets engaged into this forest of material existence and, then we think this material world is permanent, right? This body is permanent, but we know that fact that it is not permanent and it's temporary, right? But then we don't think about that. We get so attached so much, being attached to material wealth and positions. Tarun?
Tatra cha kvatit atapodaka nibhan visayan upadhavati panabhojana vyayavadi vyasana lolupa. Sometimes in this house in the sky, Gandharpura, the conditioned soul drinks, eats, and has sex. Being overly attached, he chases after the objects of the senses, just as a deer chases a mirage in the desert. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So like again, Sukdev Goswami is describing in the materialistic world, generally a conditioned soul, how he lives. Nisha?
क्वचिच्चा शेषदोषनिषदनं पुरुषविशेषं तद्वर्गुणनिमित्तमतिः सुवर्णमुपादितस्त्यग्निकामकातर इवोल्मुखपिशाचम्. Sometimes the living entity is interested in the yellow stool known as gold and runs after it. That gold is the source of material opulences and envy, and it can enable one of the afford illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, and the intoxication. Those whose minds are overcome by the mode of passion are attracted by the color of gold, just as man suffering from cold in the forest runs after a phosphorescent light, phosphorescent light in a marshy land, considering it to be fire. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Rinaji?
अथ कदाचिन्न वापसपानीय द्रविणादेन कात्मोपजीवनाभिनिवेश एतस्यां संसाराटव्यामितस्ततः परिधावतेः. Sometimes the conditioned soul is absorbed in finding residential quarters or apartments and getting a supply of water and riches to maintain his body. Absorbed in acquiring a variety of necessities, he forgets everything and perpetually runs around the forest of material existence. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So I think Sukdev Goswami continuously is telling how a entity, a living entity, runs around in this world, right? And I think we can do a few more shloks actually. Let's do one more shloks. Anil?
Yeah. क्वचित् कृत भगत विषय भयतः स्वयं पराविद्यानेन बिभ्रंशितस्मृतिस्तयैव मरीचितोय प्रायस्तानेव विधावति. The conditioned soul sometimes personally appreciates the futility of sense enjoyment in the material world, and he sometimes considers material enjoyment to be full of miseries. However, due to his strong bodily conception, his memory is destroyed, and again he runs after material enjoyment, just as an animal runs after a mirage in the desert. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, see, I think, see how Sukdev Goswami is describing this to Parikshit Maharaj, right? Because of the bodily conception, we forget what happened yesterday, right? We see what, and then again, everyone keeps running after material enjoyment. And this, what happens is the time flies, right? And then at the end of the day, again, the body is gone, and then you get a new, right? So, Rinaji?
क्वचिदुलूक झिल्ली स्वप्न वदति परुशरभ साटोपम प्रत्यक्षम परोक्षम वा रिपुराज कुल निर्भित्सितेनातिव्यथित कर्णमूल हृदयः. Sometimes the conditioned soul is very aggrieved by the chastisement of his enemies and government servants, who use harsh words against him directly or indirectly. At that time, his heart and ears become very saddened. Such chastisement may be compared to the sound of owls and crickets. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Again, the analogy is like a forest, material world. Tarun?
She called me out, then?
Tarun, yeah.
Yes. Sa yada dukkada purva sutra sa tada karashara kaka tundari dadi apunya druma lata visoda panavad ubhyarta sunya dravinam jivam mrityan swayam jivam mityamana upadhyayati. Due to his pious activities in previous lives, the conditioned soul attains material facilities in this life, but when they are finished, it takes shelter of wealth and riches, which cannot help him in this life or the next. Because of this, he approaches the living dead who possess these things. Such people are compared to impure trees, creepers, and poisonous wells. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. I think, and those are the things we observe on a day-to-day life in materialistic world, right? Nisha?
एकदा सत्प्रसङ्गानि कृतमतिर्व्युदकस्तोत्रः स्खलन्वद उभयतो अपि दुःखदं पाखण्डं भीयाति. Sometimes to mitigate distresses in the forest of the material world, the conditioned soul receives cheap blessing from atheists. He then loses all intelligence in their association. This is exactly like jumping in a shallow river. As a result, one simply breaks his head. He is not able to mitigate his suffering from the heat, and in both ways he suffers. The misguided conditioned soul also approaches so-called sadhus and swamis who preach against the principles of the Vedas. He does not receive benefit from them either in the present or in the future. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so see how a conditioned soul is like dukkadam pakhandam abhyati, right? He gets in touch with all these different kinds of entities and doesn't become happy. Right? So I think we are going to pause here and we'll continue reading this chapter where Sukdev Goswami is explaining the world of material forest. Yeah. So some more slokas remaining in this chapter. We'll stop here. And then as we know that, there have been so many Jagannath Yatras which have been going on. And yesterday we started listening to Lord Jagannath Ashtakam. We read half of it. We'll listen to the other half now. Yeah. So let's.
पथे मिलित भूदेव पटाले श्रुतिप्रादुर्भावं प्रतिपदमुपाकर्ण्य सदया दयाबन्धु सकलजगदां सिन्धुसुतया जगन्नाथ स्वामी दयापथगामी भवभूमि जगन्नाथ स्वामी दयापथगामी भवभूमि जगन्नाथ स्वामी दयापथगामी भवभूमि निहित चरणानंत शिरसे रसानुराग सरसे पुराण सुखो जगन्नाथ स्वामी नयनपथगामी भवभूमि जगन्नाथ स्वामी नयनपथगामी
bhavatu me. Jagannatha
Swami
Nayana Padmani bhavatu me. Nache Raja Nache Ramya Sakala Jana Bharatu Kale Kale Jagannath Swami Nayana Padmani bhavatu me. Jagannath Swami Nayana Padmani bhavatu me. Jagannath Swami Nayana Padmani bhavatu me. Samsara Gata Surapati Atmam Pavana Vikati Holy Nande Jagannath Swami Nayana Padmani bhavatu me. Jagannath Swami Nayana Padmani bhavatu me. Jagannath Swami Nayana Padmani bhavatu me. Jagannath Swami Nayana Padmani bhavatu me.
जगन्नाथाष्टकं पुण्यं यः पठेत् प्रयतः शुचिः सर्वपापविशुद्धात्मा विष्णुलोकं स गच्छति.
Right. She nice Lord Jagannath Ashtakam. Yeah. And I think this whole month of there have been Rath Yatras in different locations. In New York, it was there, second week of June. DC should be there long weekend, I think, for July. Last weekend, we had it in Hillsborough here in North Carolina. And all different temples have at different times. So, and in Jagannath Puri, where it starts, and as you see, right, in the beginning, you saw Lord Jagannath like coming like this. So he comes in exotic mode, right? Like very excited mode. So that's why when they bring him like, moving like that. But very beautiful Lord Jagannath Ashtakam. We'll also hear Ashtakam very short, like quick one, 5 minutes tomorrow. at the end. So meanwhile, have a good night. See you tomorrow, 10 p.m. EST. Yeah.
Okay,
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, everyone. Good
Hare
night.
Krishna.